You got it. Second try. Nice job.
We'll call to order the Finance Subcommittee, May 24th, 2018. Minutes forthcoming. Any mayor communications?
No.
Any public speak outside of the budget? All right, so we've got the school and the debt. We'll start with the school. Thank you guys for being here. So last year it was an essential services budget, and this year it's the same again.
We actually prepared an essential service budget originally, or, early on in the process. And that was a budget that was a 2.53% increase. And we were asked to reduce it to between 1.5% and 2%. So we then came back with a 2% budget. The reason that we felt that we couldn't go below 2% was that in order to get below 2%, we would either have to cut positions or to dip a little bit more into reserve than we thought it was prudent to do. What we've been using our reserve to do is to level out our requests for city funding for the budget. So when I started here 3 years ago, they were applying somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 of reserve a year. We're up to about $1 million, and that's because we're getting more revenue, and that's because school choice has increased. Primarily, circuit breaker has increased, so it's grown, and we've been applying more.
Is the circuit breaker increasing because of the state reimbursement or because of?
It has to do with the kind of placements your special needs students need. And right now, we have more students in more costly programs than we did three years ago. To service them appropriately is more costly.
And those are programs out of district that we're sending
Not
students to?
necessarily, mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly circuit breakers, mostly those very expensive out-of-district placements. What the state does is they establish an amount up to which you can spend per special ed student to program appropriately for them. If you go above that, then you can apply to have a percentage of that reimbursed to you through circuit breaker.
Well, it's great to hear that that's increased, because my time on the school committee and city council, it's always been circuit breakers decreasing, and the percentage the state says they're going to give us, they don't actually give us that much.
Well, there's always been a promise to fund it at a higher percentage than they do. It's usually typically between 68% and 72%. But like other things that they say they're going to reimburse at a higher, it's budget dependent, and they've never been able to fund it at the maximum that they promised.
And so that kind of reserve account you're talking about is mostly the circuit breaker, or is it also the choice in?
It's also the choice in, and that's gone up substantially in the last 3 years. It's gone up, $300,000 should go up again in fiscal year 19.
But we still have way more people choice out than choice in, but the number that choice in is higher than it has been in the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really grown in the last 3 years. It's grown since the new high school opened. A lot of those families that were going out have returned. And the other thing is we've become more attractive for people to come in. But our elementary schools have a lot of choice students as well, on the strength of the educational programming in those schools.
Great teachers doing great things in there.
Yeah.
So one question I have, and you may have already answered it.
So our fear in, just so that I can finish that thought.
Yeah, please.
Our fear in dipping too deeply into that reserve is $1 million is a lot to apply. And if we're not able to apply $1 million next year, it leaves a bigger hole for the city to fill. So part of what we're doing is to try to very planfully be able to apply the same amount every year so that we can keep our budget growth that we request of the city level, that we're not asking for 2.5% one year and 9% the next, for example.
Because the circuit breaker and the choice in numbers are, you just never know year to year.
That's right. That's right.
What's going to come in.
That's right. And, it can go up and down. It's not a guarantee.
So remind me what you said earlier about what the original request was, what percentage?
We originally requested 2.53, then reduced to 2, and then was asked to reduce again, based on the city's projected revenue being less than what they anticipated. And we sort of went back and forth a little bit and ended up at 1.79% increase.
And I think it's also important to note that, you know, our contract negotiations ended up in a 2% increase in salary increase for our employees.
A year, less than a year, a little
Right.
less than a year ago.
We're in year 2 of 5. What's that?
Of 3.
Of
We're at
3.
the end of year 1 of a 3-year. We've got 2 more years on this contract.
We're in
It's
year 2
just
of 5
settled.
of transportation.
That's right. That's right.
I know, 2 of 5 of something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I read that somewhere.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's important to note with that contract settlement, that there was increased time in the school day for students in years 2 and 3 of the contract. So it was 2%, but there was also additional learning time gained, which was very important. That was
Yeah,
something that,
Because we have one of the shortest days of any of the neighboring districts, so we've been trying to negotiate to lengthen the day, and we're able to negotiate the extra 5 minutes with this contract.
And that starts next year, you said? That starts year 2?
Yes.
so at the 1.79 budget, which is the one in front of you, if everything remains exactly as it is now, you know, the staff that currently is on board stays, the students that we have currently are the same ones we need to program for next year. And that can change, education's pretty volatile. We would need to dip into the reserve more than we had intended at the originally proposed budget.
So dipping into the reserves, you expect to get up to that 2.53 number? Like, the essential services are gonna maintain?
I think we would
There's not cuts to get.
dip into the reserve to the tune of about $100,000. These numbers are a little soft. And as I said, things can change where, you know, something breaks our way between now and we open school and it, you know, it would be less than that. It could also go the other way. Right now, if everything stayed the same, we think it would be about $100,000 more of the reserve than what we had originally hoped.
But the
we need to
179
use.
that we're looking at, adding and spending whatever reserves we need to spend, still keeps you with that 0.1 FTE added and no cuts in any of
That's
that.
correct, that's correct. The 1.79, the 2.53 budget only added that 1/2 of 1 day for a teacher, and the 1.79 holds it. Yes,
With
So-
using more reserve.
yeah, but uses more reserve.
We don't usually go over the whole budget line by line because the school committee, finance committee will do that. But when I look at that budget, that's a 17,232,000. And then the requested budget is a 17,267,000. So which one's which? What am I looking at?
It's 17,232, I think the 17,267
That's the recommended?
might have been the 2% or the 2.5 that you originally, like, we had a.
That's the
and they-
original 253 request?
It might be the 253 or it might be the 2. I had something in a draft.
Are
prior
you
to-
asking me what the 1.79 budget is in total?
No, in my book, which
Oh,
you
okay,
have,
I wouldn't know.
I have the 17,267, 798 as the request, because we had gotten something for you before you finalized it, when I was preparing it. And then the 2, it's probably, I think it's the difference between the 2% and the 1.79.
So that sheet you're looking at there, Dale, that's what I've got. That's the 17,232, right?
Correct.
And that's the 1.79.
That's the
Correct.
1.79, right, which
Correct.
is the recommended.
Then-
But like Dale said, there were several back and forths prior to them finalizing it, and so I must have included one of the drafts as the request. It looks like that looks like the 2% increase to me. if
So
I remember the-
that $35,000, you guys went back and forth on. So yeah, I just want to make sure we all are looking at the same things. And then my questions are kind of all over the place, sorry. So you said to add a .1 full-time is half of one day a week?
.1 is a half a day for a teacher.
So is
Yes.
that the?
It's currently a teacher at the high school who's working half-time. And what we added was a half a day a week to that. So they'll work 3 days a week rather than 2.5 days a week.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, last year we added 4.5 positions, but really with moving people around, we really just added a high school phys ed paraprofessional, if I remember correctly, if my notes are correct.
We did add 4.5 positions last year and 5 the previous year. But this year we're adding point one, which is a half a day a week.
We had other positions in our original budget, but then, as we found out what the revenues were, we had to reduce.
Mhm. But this .1, that's not that pair, it's a teacher?
It's a teacher, correct. Oh, I know what you're asking. We had in a full-time para
To the
for
high school
phys ed last year.
Yeah.
And what we
Oh.
did instead is hire a half-time
So that is that
teacher.
position, but it's a different
that position, but we decided it was better served by a half-time teacher than a full-time para.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's been working out then?
It is, yes. It's really eased the size of the phys ed classes, and underneath the size issue was a safety issue. So, yes, it's working very well.
Because last year, with the kind of restructuring positions around, there was some pairs lost, maybe 1.5 pairs lost, but then we were gonna add that pair in, and, so everything's going well though.
Yes.
You hear a lot of headlines about pairs as a former para.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta take care of the parents.
Near and dear to your heart, right?
It sure is.
Yeah.
So it's good we're not cutting anything. The initiatives in the narrative those are all current initiatives?
Yes.
That's what I thought, I just wanted to make sure. There's a lot going on in the schools.
Yes.
Mr. Lynch, the full school budget is in the appendixes.
Yeah, on the back.
Well, this is.
Oh, is this from the strategic plan? Is that right?
That's just that, but your full thing is.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure what Dan was looking at.
The other thing that
Yeah.
I didn't say, which I think is a sort of a helpful statement in thinking about the increase, is at the 2.5%, we're down to 1.79. The 2 of the 2.5 was contracts, labor
Yeah.
contracts. So we're now below what the labor contract increase was. I think that's helpful to.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
As a thinking about it kind of statement.
That's why I'd like, if I may,
Absolutely.
to question the original budget for FY18. I'm reading a figure of 16,900,000 for FY18. On page 95.
That's in the mayor's budget too, I don't know if you've got that.
I don't. Yeah.
And I see a requested budget of 16.2.
No, you're not looking at the bottom line.
I'm looking at personnel services.
Right, so.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at personnel services
But look,
total.
you gotta look at bottom line, because they can do whatever they want. So,
Well-
what, no, they can. So often we wait for them to pull out what their non-net spending is in section 2, which is, we pulled out the bus contract this time, but it's always usually done through the adjustments, because there are other things that make that up.
So you're suggesting looking at the grand total, which
Correct,
is
because
16.9,
Right,
and
the
now it goes to
detail, all the
17.2.
detail in the school budget is in their budget, not ours, because we just, whatever
You
is
don't reprint
appro-
their budget.
We do,
Well, it's in the
it's
back.
in your book.
There's 2 appendices about that.
Yes.
But just for the record, for everybody watching at home, the school committee, finance committee
Has a full authority to
full
move it
authority.
within their lines.
They appropriate any spending intra-department mental happens with the business director and the superintendent's sign off on any purchase order or anything like that, unless it's over $5,000, and then it has to go to the school
City
committee,
council.
finance committee, or city council.
Right.
So just the way money on this floor can move around with the mayor signing off before it gets to the council, sometimes that can happen upstairs through the school committee. And if you go to Appendix D,
So we have like probably, I would say, 10% of their account lines. So to try and reproduce their request into all these buckets,
Okay, I wasn't asking for that, I just was trying to get a sense of
the 900,000
how,
is typically the
how
bus
everything moved around
contract.
with personnel, on the personnel line, but I won't go there. Original request was for 2.53, 1.79 is what we all agreed.
Where we ended up, yes, correct.
Also, we're talking about the circuit breaker, and if I was understanding the nuance of the circuit breaker, you were saying that the kinds of students that you're sending out, the required services, special ed services. Just because the state's sending us more money, it doesn't mean our budget is really doing that much better, because the expense is that much
Correct.
greater.
Correct,
Is that?
correct.
So,
That's,
although
that's an accurate statement, yes.
So you can
Yeah.
see that we added.
Because we have to spend it to be reimbursed part of it.
That's right.
Yes.
I just wanted to be sure.
Right.
Can you give us a sense of some of the numbers, just so that people can begin to understand? You know, we send out how many children out of district?
I don't know those numbers off the
I
top of
wouldn't.
my
I
head,
don't either.
but an out-of-district placement can run between $200,000 and $300,000 a student. And then if there's transportation associated with that student as well, it can be up to $30,000 a year. And,
For
the-
transportation,
yeah,
plus a couple $100,000 for placement, you're up to $250,000. So I'm just wondering how many of those we're doing.
I don't know those
Yeah.
numbers, I can certainly get them for you, but what I would say is, in the 3 years that I've been in Easthampton, we've also had a brand-new special ed administrator, and she's been very, she's also in her 3rd year, Sarah Mochek. She's been very successful at moving some of those students that have been outside the district back in,
Back to the district.
if they're able to be.
If they're able to transition in.
Right, those students who are very, very expensive are students that have multiple handicapping conditions that are, it's not likely that they
Typically,
are
they wouldn't
able
come
to
back,
be.
right, but it's,
served.
I'm thinking of the others that would go out, and the placement would be a $70,000 placement.
Sure.
$40,000.
Sure.
So those are the ones that we
Sure.
usually can bring
That
back.
typically are the ones, yeah, I would imagine that would come back.
Right. And those students tend to be very low incidence handicapping conditions.
Right.
So they are programs regionally to address something that's not very common in a school district of this size.
Yeah. Sometimes districts are creative around us, that they've set up their own special programs. We did at one point with the Parsons Street, if I remember correctly.
And we still have that program, but now it's just housed in our high school as opposed to
Within the
over at
high school,
Parsons. Uh-huh.
okay.
And, you know, we've been, our special ed director has been very innovative about creating programs to try to keep our children in our district. She's done a really good job of that. And the good news is, with the new building, we will have facilities where we can have therapeutic programs, many more programs for our students with special needs. And, you know, our goal is to keep as many, if not all, in our school district with us in an inclusive environment.
Certainly, the placement's required, and someone's, it's just not appropriate within the
Right.
school, and
Right.
then we have to do
There are some
what
students.
we have to do, right?
Yeah, well, there are some students who need residential placements, and we certainly aren't prepared to accommodate that.
And the law mandates that you educate children with special needs in the least restrictive, appropriate environment. It's always better for them to be educated in their home community if they're able to be.
Mhm. Okay, with circuit breaker school and charter, if I remember the figures, it was the 2 million out?
Yes, that's a combination of choice and charter. Our charter expenses are increasing. Having Hilltown Charter in our community wasn't a help in terms of that. But our choice out is decreasing and our choice in is increasing.
Why did the chart?
Yeah.
Those
in the
numbers are
back,
all in here somewhere.
It's a little harder with, on the screen. Can you refresh just for the public who doesn't have the charts in front of them, what those numbers, what the increase looks like?
They have, so they have on, right here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, in
Looking at dollars and not kids.
yeah. So you want dollars or kids?
I was looking at the dollars.
Yeah. So our charter out in FY '17 was 104, and predicted for FY '18 is 107 children. Went from $941,209 to $1,050,008. Choice out in FY '17 was 171 students. In FY '18, it's 152. And it went down from a little over $1 million to $966,435.
Heading in the right direction. And
Yeah.
definitely the numbers on the choice looks,
Right. Choice in, you can see we went from 113 in 2017 to 124 in 2018. And you can see that it's been gradually increasing since 2014, when we opened the high
open
school.
up the school.
And even going back to 14, the choice outs go from 186 down to 152, and the choice ins go from 74 up to 124.
Right, so that's certainly the trend.
It's trending the right way.
Yeah.
Any predictions? Just can't hold anybody to it.
Well, we
Just
certainly are
thoughts.
predicting that the trend will increase that way, and we expect and hope that our charter numbers will go down with brand-new facilities in our city, which, will be $2 million that will be available for city services that aren't currently available. So that was what we believe was another selling point for the building project.
I felt it was probably one of the biggest selling points
Yeah.
financially, when you look at it from the financial perspective. I'm certainly hopeful that we're able to reduce the 2 to at least 1. And
Yeah,
maybe,
I'm very optimistic about the impact, the positive impact of the new building. When you have a
Yeah.
state-of-the-art facility for the families in Easthampton, I'm not sure why they would want to choose to go somewhere else.
Right.
Even to a charter school. Charter schools offer sometimes a different type of educational environment. But, when you look at the Hilltown Charter School and would compare it to what we're going to have with our new facility, I think it would be very competitive.
Yes.
does Hilltowns, to just look to them for a moment, do they have something special that they do?
I
That
would
they
think-
pitch to parents?
Yeah, certainly.
That, I'm not sure I understand what that is, and I think it might be helpful to understand if we're losing people to them. I had heard the words hands-on approach to education.
Project-based learning, which we have in our schools, but we certainly will have more opportunities for that in the new school. Each charter school has an area of focus, but I think hands-on learning was one for Hilltown Charter. I think it's just a different environment. It's a more, it's kind of a self-selected environment for families, and I think some families like that. And I think there are a variety of reasons, and I think I'm probably not the one to speak to it as much as the director of Hilltown Charter.
I just wonder if we could be competitive in some way, if there's some way to structure our programs.
I think that we are competitive.
More competitive.
Yeah, and I think
I wasn't suggesting that
Yeah.
we weren't competitive. I think the numbers you're talking about don't seem all that much of an increase, although it is an increase, given that we have the school here that was once in Haydenville.
I would agree, and they have a cap on their enrollment as well, so, in their different grades. And again, I think the new facilities will just make us very competitive in both choice and charter.
I would just offer that I think around competitive, between our public schools and any charter school, it's hard, because the funding formula and what a charter school can do or can't do with curriculum or classroom structure is much different than what you see in a public school district. So as Superintendent Follansbee is talking about project learning, and it's a part of a wide curriculum, and you have public school systems that are not self-selected by parents, you need to provide a wealth of opportunities. Where charter schools have this, you know, opportunity to really focus on one style of learning. They have different requirements for teacher certification and time and learning, and they have a flexibility that is especially unique and very difficult to compare apples to apples. I mean, my daughter went to Hilltown from first grade to eighth grade. And, you know, it worked for us as a family, but I could never compare that to a public school education, a traditional public school education, because they're just so far apart as far as, at that point, teacher certification in charter schools, you know, they could really make their own environment. I think it's got more structure, but it's hard to do apples to apples, and I wouldn't want to see the public schools try to match toe to toe. I mean, we want to, you know, diverse learners, diverse learning opportunities, and hopefully a redo on Chapter 7 funding and charters. Let's see charter
Agreed.
schools, yeah, come
Yeah,
under
statewide, we need a whole-
DESI.
A whole revamp statewide, but, you know, at least we know with this new school coming in, we know a lot of people
Yeah.
leave us at kindergarten and 5th grade and 9th grade.
Right.
And we stopped the bleeding in 9th grade, and now we'll be able to stop the bleeding in
Mhm.
kindergarten and 5th grade.
Very exciting.
Yeah, and especially because we're bringing the 5th grade back into the elementary schools,
Mm.
and our families have said over and over again that that's what they want. So we're excited about that. It's just an exciting opportunity for our families and our children in Easthampton.
Dale, on the, in the school budget, the district generated revenue, there's a nice chart and breakdown. And you can see there the circuit breaker going up the last couple of years and hopefully staying up. But the other revolving accounts have also jumped, and I was just wondering, what are those other, that's the choice in, and is there other?
Actually, no. We sort of group all of the others together, and it's bus fees, early childhood tuition, primarily those two. There are a couple of other little ones, but primarily those two. And the reason why you've seen them go up is we've been able not to use them at the same clip as they were being used previous to a few
So that
years back.
includes savings.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. They were being essentially emptied every year, and we've not had to totally empty them because we've been working really planfully to try to build a reserve to do what I was talking about, which is to keep our request level year to year,
Mhm.
if we can.
And on that same chart, it's proposed for 19 that we get less federal and state grants than we have in the last 5 years. And is that because of more spending out of that column, or less grants available, or?
They, well, if you look, they actually have been dwindling. Some of what you're seeing is fiscal year 14 was the last year that there was the AHERA funds. What was the- ERA.
Yeah.
What else were they called? They had another name.
I don't remember.
When the economy tanked, they made federal grants available to the schools in a couple of years, and 14 was the last year of that. And when that large sum of money went away, was a program Obama did to stimulate the economy. When that went away, then the grants started to dwindle in total.
Yeah, and our title grants, Title I, Title IIA, that are entitlement grants have been dwindling too, as the state has not funded them to the level they once did. And we've used those for professional development and some for salaries, particularly Title I, which is the literacy and math support grant.
Aren't those grants, and please educate me, aren't they based on student needs, student lack, either funding, either being poor or lack of certain skills?
They're based on a percentage of poverty in the community, and then there's some other criteria. I don't know if you remember the other ones, Dale, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are, but that's what how they determine it at the state level for each community. And then they give you your allocation, and based on the needs in your district and the poverty in each school, you allocate certain amounts to each school in your district.
So could the change be because our demographics are changing? Or is it that the funds themselves are dwindling?
They've been less.
And the demographics are the same?
My opinion is they've been less robustly funded at the federal level.
Yeah.
And it starts at the federal level and then gets passed down to the state to sort of meter out.
Mhm.
And as the economy's recovered, they've been less robustly funded at the federal level. Those grants, the title grants,
Mhm.
Title I, Title II.
But we still have plenty of students on reduced and free lunch.
Yes, yes,
That speaks to your question.
we do.
And the new building, is pre-K gonna increase? I know I should know that, but,
Is it going to increase?
yeah, we're gonna have more spots for.
It would have the capacity to do so.
Yes.
And then, we anticipate a jump in kindergarten enrollment next year?
Mhm.
And where's that come from?
Well, based on the census
Hmm.
that we use when we're predicting what we're going to have in kindergarten registration, of the registrations that have come in to date. So yes, that's predicted,
Sometimes you see a jump in pre-K, but I didn't see that, but.
yeah.
The first appendix D, net school spending, I just think is really important to look at, even if I don't want to keep you guys here all night. But it should, it's really important for people to understand that we are spending over $25 million on education, not 17, and with the net school spending and the non-net school spending and all that. And then I want to make sure, just for my own, that I've got this clear. So the foundation budget,
The
this,
estimate and then of course we do the actual.
is that 25 million incorrect?
Yeah, that's based on the budget proposed and the estimates from our budget and the agreement that we had in place. So for, like, the resource officer charge, for the 9 months is in there, and charges for payroll and charges for the schools.
So that 2 million
Maintenance.
non-net spending, that's money we've seen already in other budgets. The crossing guards from the police department.
Yeah, I mean, the net school spending is always part of the budget proposal, but these are estimates, and then the actual is done at the end of the year, I think in December, is that when we do it? Maybe you're on the same time that you're doing your report, we have to give an actual net school spending report to the council. That are the true numbers.
Mhm.
What we actually spend, not what we think.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just for somebody looking at this, we think we're gonna spend over 25 million on education.
Altogether, yes.
Altogether.
Yeah.
And doing that puts us $3,000 or $4,000 above the per pupil number that the state gives us. Right? I'm not trying to trick anybody here, I just want to make sure we're all
Yes.
reading the same thing. I think that's important for people to understand, because we could just spend 10,000 on each student and
Exactly.
do a worse job than we're doing.
Yeah, the effort that the community is expending on education exceeds the minimum that the state requires significantly.
And it's
That's
hugely
not true
important.
in all communities.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, the school department does a great job stretching what little they have, but also the community's maximum, as we saw on Tuesday, so I think that's great.
Right, and a lot
Most
of this
of the community.
spending is, stuff that we've talked about in other departments where there, insurances and stuff that we covered yesterday. Obviously some of the insurance we carry is for the school department. And there's also a similar report on the DPW where we show, the cost of carrying their insurances as well. Just so that it's, we recognize the cost by those departments.
If I could jump just for a moment, it's probably out of place for where we are, but the reserves you had mentioned earlier, and you had said were asked to dip $1 million into the reserves
We.
at one point, and then we thought it was gonna be about 100,000. How much is in the reserve account, approximately?
Well, we haven't been audited,
Right.
This
So it
year.
isn't certified.
There was 800, just shy of $800,000 at the end of last year, the last audited
The
figure
last
we
audited
have,
figure,
yes.
okay. So assuming that nothing has changed, one could.
We would
assume-
expect to grow it a little bit, and having, at the end of fiscal year 18, we will have expected to grow it a little bit, and, yes. And be able to spend $1 million in fiscal year 19.
Right.
And I think it's important to state that before Dale came, and also it was obviously partly because of the recession, we had virtually no reserves. And that was a very bad place. So our ask to the city had to be higher each year, high percentage. And we didn't get the percentage, and we had to cut a lot of positions. So now we're trying to build back.
Certainly the build back is terrific. Certainly the guidance that you've given us, Dale, I know is very much appreciated. And Nancy, we're gonna miss you terribly. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
On the record.
Thank you. At least we got the school.
Yes.
I'm going to retire a happy person.
There you go.
But thank you, much appreciated.
Any questions from the public?
Public stands.
I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of the various departments listed under section 3, the sum of $17,232,798.00 for the various departments listed under section 3 schools, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations as recommended by the mayor and finance subcommittee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Sorry, I'm chairing and clerking right now, so.
That's not easy to do.
Short minutes.
Awesome, yes, so, thank you guys for your hard work and
Thank
for
you.
coming, and
Thank
as
you
I always
very
say,
much.
thanks to the school committee, to the finance committee.
Thank you.
It's a thankless job.
Thank you.
Page 134, I think, is the section on debt and interest. So last year it went down because the public safety complex came off, and now it's back up. And because of the anticipation notes and I was a little confused about that last sentence of the narrative. The increase is due to the anticipated BAN, but also the pay down of another BAN?
Yeah, so we have, so the design work, there's a pay down of the design work
That was already in here, but now we're paying it?
Right, so we're using 150 to pay down, the ban for the design work, in this year, it's being paid down over 5 years. And then we did an authorization in 2017 to buy some equipment, but because of the delivery time for that equipment, we're just now getting that stuff. So we kind of skipped a year with that equipment schedule, which was part of also the reason that the pay down wasn't as, the payments weren't as great last year. We sort of, because we had the authorization and we were gonna borrow, but there's no
So it
point in
wasn't doing it.
borrowing and then
If you don't have a.
Yeah.
if we don't have the bill. We are literally getting delivery on all 3 of those vehicles that we planned for in fiscal 17 this month or next,
And that's the ambulance and the fire truck
in a dump truck.
and a dump truck.
And that's the $1.2 million.
And so the increases are in principal temp loans and wastewater treatment phase 2. So how do those break down between those two?
Well, the principal and interest for the short-term borrowing, that's what we're talking about. There's the design money, there's design money for complete streets that's almost paid off, and then there's those 3 pieces of equipment. So that's more stuff this year than last year because we had skipped a year of equipment borrowing. And the wastewater is funny, it's a funny schedule. It doesn't come down every year, it sort of fluctuates a little bit. It has to do with the way the trust finances it. It's a very low interest loan, but it doesn't always go straight down.
Because usually we pay a level principal, so we see the principal go down.
Right.
And, you know,
Yeah, but
except
there's a.
when we're adding things to it.
So part of the why that one's a little different is that we get with the money we borrow from the Clean Water Trust, we get a gift of both principal and interest for that. So as the payment comes down, the gift goes down, and so sometimes it doesn't line up exactly. It's usually pretty nominal between the two, but it just doesn't go straight. But it's a 2% loan with an admin fee to
Right.
credit.
It's a good thing you can keep all this stuff straight.
There's a big spreadsheet.
But then interest is down just because of how, the types of loans they are.
Well, right, so interest is down because our principals on all of these loans are lower. So as the principal goes down, the interest goes down. And interest rates were low for quite some time. Interest rates are rising, so that's unfortunate for us at this particular moment in time.
How much does that affect? Isn't some borrowing set? Like the
Oh, yeah, it's all set.
long-term borrowing, is it, well, for example, the 2% loan is 2%.
Correct.
The school is at,
So there's a couple
The
of
high
things.
school.
The school is at what it's at.
right,
But when we go out to borrow new stuff, it's going up.
it's gonna be a new rate, right?
Correct, right. I'm just saying.
And we won't be going out to borrow on that.
I actually, just did the borrowing for the vehicles.
For the vehicles, right. But for the school, we won't be borrowing for another,
Year probably.
Year, anyway.
Well, it depends, the design money might come quicker.
right. And we'll only borrow a portion of it.
Correct.
As much as you need to borrow to make whatever current payments you have to.
Correct.
And then 3 years from now,
Well,
we'll
whenever
probably
I.
borrowed it all.
Right, well, it depends on how fast the project moves, so that's a lot of money, and we can't front it. So, if the project's moving fast and we're gonna get bills fast, then we need to have,
Right, be ready to go.
we have to be ready to go.
Let's hope that the interest rates remain stable or just slightly increased.
Right.
Appeal to the public for good interest rates during that period.
Absolutely. So the bond anticipation notes in the biz, would you call that a ban?
Right.
A ban? Ban? So an anticipated ban, that's what we're talking about?
So
Or is it just a,
I'm
using the word
cheap,
anticipated?
so
twice?
here's how it goes. Melissa's cheap. Bands.
Fiscally responsible.
Yeah. Bands, don't, bands have a lower interest rate by nature because they're 1 year.
Mhm.
So, but they're subject to fluctuation when you roll them over. And they also require no pay down, but I scheduled them in my process. You know, I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna borrow, you know, the $1.2 million. This is what it would take to pay that down over 5 years. And I can either do that in bands, which right now it's a band because, you know, the truck's gonna come in, they gotta finish the equipment. Do we need, you know, are we gonna borrow the full, you know, 650,000? Are we only gonna use 635? So this gives me that time to figure it out, borrow exactly the number that we need before, you know, finalizing it, because you don't want to finalize it. And then a state house note is fairly inexpensive to borrow also. And so I can do those from 3 to 5 years, but I don't wanna lock into 3 to 5 years if, I don't know if it's really 650 or is it 635, and, you know, can I borrow the 6 now and the 35 later, you know, that kind of thing. So, but it's subject to the market, which is what I guess I'm trying to say. It's kind of like getting a variable interest rate or something like that, because next year, what's the market gonna look like? But there are reasons to do that, and so that, they call that the bond anticipation note, like, I'm gonna bond, the bond anticipation note, because I'm gonna bond this, or permanently borrow this, but right now I don't know exactly to the penny how much I need, so I'm just gonna do a band, and the interest rates are typically significantly less for short-term borrowing than long-term, so, you know, you kind of do the math on that, and even if interest rates are rising, if the interest rate's a full percentage base less, because I'm not permanently borrowing it anyway, and I pay less in closing costs, for lack of a better word, you know, when you finance your mortgage, these costs come in the box. So, that's how I like to do it. But that's why I do them that way. But they're a little more, they're not set. They're set for 1 year, and then you let it in.
And then when is this building coming up?
I am not, it's soon, but it's not like in the next year or two. I wanna say it's in the 5 to 10 year range, but I could get back to you on that. I just don't recall.
And then page 137, the kind of long-term look here. That'll get real shook up when the pre-K to 8 gets added to it, though.
Correct, that's what we have now.
Yeah.
That's everything we have now. And anything new that might be coming.
Do you have questions?
I'm good.
Any questions from the public? In that case, I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,332,670.75 for the various departments listed under Section 7, Debt and Interest, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations, with the following amounts be transferred or raised as recommended by the mayor and finance subcommittee. Water sewer enterprise, $517,049.68. Debt exclusion taxation to be reduced by reserves for amortization, $3,310.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So Dan, if you look, I'm pretty sure that this building is a general fund bond, and you can see that it only goes out to 23, so that it has to be included in that number somehow.
So sometime in the next 5 years, probably.
Yeah, and I would, it might even be 2, because I think the 275 is for that equipment stuff. I'll double check, but it has to be in that number, because I'm pretty sure that this building was built, was borrowed completely general fund with the exclusion.
This is our last meeting. Anything further? Anything we missed? Anything you want to add? Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.